Welcome back to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. We're still going here for a little while longer as we do part 2 of our podcast. This part is going to run on Tuesday. We appreciate everybody being here. Got a good amount of people watching us live here on YouTube, which is exciting. This is the first time that the three of us have gone live. We weren't necessarily planning to go live initially, and then I texted Mary Kay and Ashley. I'm like, hey, you guys want to do this? And of course, they're always game for doing this stuff. So here we are live on our YouTube channel. So we appreciate everybody who is a part of this. So let's talk about that trade down, and let's go to this question from one of our Football Insider subscribers, 216 area code. Why not build a team around a generational talent like Travis Hunter? Why do the Browns always go for quantity versus quality? Draft picks don't win games, exceptional players do. Mary Kay, we're going to be debating this for years and years here, especially if Travis Hunter becomes the player that he became. But again, with a little space, with a little time, and let's face it, Mason Graham is a good football player. Where are you at on this trade down?
Love it. I absolutely love it. Love it, love it, love it. If they had gone down to 18 or 17 or 21 or something like that, then I probably wouldn't like it. But all they did was move back 3 spaces to pick up an extra second-round pick, which is where they called the sweet spot of this draft with the best players in it in that area. So they picked up the 36. They picked up 126, I think was the next one this year. And then they picked up an extra first round. I almost wanted to call James Gladstone of the Jaguars and ask him if he was okay. He's a first-time young general manager, and I feel like Andrew Berry just got a whole bunch out of him really in this draft. I really do, in this trade. But they are so excited about the player that they got in Travis Hunter. And if they get that two-way player, if they get a Pro Bowler at receiver and cornerback, then they will be wildly ecstatic with what they got out of the deal. But the Browns transformed their running game with this trade already. They completely transformed their running game, choosing Quinshon, Judkins, and Dylan Sampson. Now, I think I have that right, Daniel and Ashley? I got Sampson was the second.
They were both the running backs were picks that they got from
out of the trade. Okay, that's what I got. So I think that's phenomenal. I took the victory lap for this yesterday, but I'm going to just take another little one today. I had said that they needed to draft 2 running backs out of this draft, as well as 2 quarterbacks. 2 running backs because I felt like they needed to just restock that room with a big bruising guy, the same way we kind of think about the Kareem Hunts and the Nick Chubbs, and then more of a speedy, flashy, shifty, third down kind of back that can still also play on every single down. So they've got guys that can pick up the blitz, they can run, they can catch. They've completely remade the running back room, which I think was so important this year. Then they acquired the first round pick next year from the Jaguars that, as we talked about in an earlier pod, that could become the foundation for their quarterback of the future, for their franchise quarterback, and they could be set up for the next 12 years or so. And then, of course, all they had to do was move back 3 spots to get one of the premier elite players in this draft in Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan that everybody thought belonged in the top 5. I didn't see him out of the top 5 in any mock draft I looked at anywhere. So they still got a top 5 player who that's a premium position now, defensive tackle. Absolute 100% premium position. Restock the running game, and they still have that first round pick for next year. I don't really necessarily see how you could go wrong with this. I will be very surprised if the Browns don't win this hands down.
I don't know look, I think if Travis Hunter turns into what we all thought he could be, I think the Jags will be fine with it, honestly. I mean, if they have a guy who's a Pro Bowler on both sides of the ball, which is asking a lot, admittedly. I mean, this is something unprecedented, and this was one of the concerns I had about picking him. I still would have done it if the trade down wasn't available. But, is he going to be able to hold up physically at the NFL, where it's just a more physical game? It's a little tougher. The talent level is just higher across the board. But I do think if Jacksonville gets that guy, I think they'll be fine with this trade. That being said, Andrew Berry did a great job. Like, he came away. If you're going to trade Travis Hunter, this is the kind of haul you want to get. And I think ultimately we'll judge this trade on what happens at the quarterback position. And if they do ultimately have to use that pick on a quarterback, or use those picks to move up for a quarterback. And Mary Kay, I think the point you made about where they moved down is important, because it's easy to think back to 2016, right? When they traded that number 2 pick and they made 2 mistakes, I think, in trading away from Carson Wentz. The first was they moved down too far. They went down to number 8. And there were elite players in that draft really through the top 6 or 7. So you had Joey Bosa went 3. Ezekiel Elliott went 4. Now we can have the running back discussion. We don't have to do that. Jalen Ramsey went 5. Ronnie Stanley went 6. Then DeForest Buckner went 7. So really you're looking at, you should have tried to stay in the top 5 or 6 of that draft. But then when they moved to 8, they traded down again. And Jack Conklin went 8. So even if you would have stayed there and taken a guy like a Jack Conklin, and there were other players too who were pretty good players that you could have taken, they traded down again. They end up taking Corey Coleman. So I think, if nothing else, if you're anti-trade down, that's fine. But I think the thing that they avoided was trading down too far. And then Andrew Berry told us on Thursday night they weren't going to trade out of 5. That was where they were going to stay. They weren't getting the offers, or they just weren't willing to trade it. So Ashley, I think that's instructive to look back at 2016 and maybe the mistakes they made in that trade down, and to only trade down a few spots and get a guy that I think is going to be really disruptive in Mason Graham. And again, probably that last of the top tier of this draft. It's tough to really complain about this trade down.
Yeah, I think I'm less down on the trade down than I was on Thursday night, but in terms of maybe still being more muted about it, I think my issue, and this was essentially what I wrote in my instant reaction on Thursday, is it is still, in some capacity, always a gamble when you are trading away from a tangible, sure thing, a player. You traded away from Travis Hunter for another, more picks. Okay. That first rounder next year is an unknown entity right now. We don't know for sure about that class. We don't know where the pick is going to fall. Maybe it will be one of those things where they can take 2 first rounders and move up next year to chase a franchise quarterback. At that point, that would be a win, an obvious win, right? But right now it's just unknown. They've had so few swings at the plate in terms of first rounders that makes it harder to judge and jump up and down. But what I will say is what they did with those extra picks this year, I really liked, right? I think I would have been disappointed if they came away from the second round and hadn't gotten one of those 2 Ohio State running backs in particular. I think both those guys, you probably can't go wrong either way. I'm glad they got one of them, especially. And I'm glad they added Dylan, too, because he just brings something so different, which we talked about yesterday on day 3. I think that's a big deal for them in terms of revitalizing an area of this offense that really needed to be overhauled this offseason. So, yeah, I think this year I come away from it I feel tentatively good about it. I feel okay. I guess I should just say I feel okay about it. It's not the end of the world, I don't think.
Well, and this is the reason to feel tentative. We don't know if this front office, we don't know how they're going to evaluate quarterbacks. Like, we don't know if they can do it, if they can pick that guy. I mean, we just spent the earlier part of this pod, or if you're listening on the pod on Monday, we spent a lot of time talking about Dylan Gabriel and them viewing potentially Dylan Gabriel as a franchise quarterback. That is going against the grain. And, are they going to be right about that? I guess we'll see. They picked DTR in the 5th round a few years ago, and he did not work out here. He still has not shown that he can play in the NFL. So we don't know for sure, because we haven't seen it, if Andrew Berry and this front office can evaluate and pick a quarterback. Now, they have not tried to take one high yet, so I'll give them that. But that is the other piece of this, Mary Kay. If we are at a point next year where they have to make a quarterback decision, we've got to trust a group that hasn't evaluated and picked that position effectively to this point.
Well, I'll tell you what, at that point, if the quarterbacks that they have added to the roster this year do not work out for them in the way that they hoped that they would, in this very quarterback friendly offense, where it's kind of easy to look pretty good in this offense if you have the horses, and they will. Although I have to say, they always leave themselves short, in my opinion, at wide receiver. I think they need one more really good Pro Bowl caliber receiver. And I don't know how they're going to get him at this point, but I think they need to try to find out how to do that. And no, I don't think it's George Pickens. No, they did not draft him for a reason, and that's not going to happen. So we can forget about that. But they need to find a really good receiver. Not going to be easy at this point. But I do think that if they get to next year and they haven't demonstrated that they can add or draft a really good quality quarterback, then I think they need to bring in outside help. They need to bring in a consultant. Or maybe now they have him on board, and maybe Bill Musgrave could be more involved in that decision. He's been a coordinator at 6 different spots. Maybe Tommy Rees is more involved in that decision. But one way or the other, they have to make sure that they are 100% covered on how to draft that quarterback next year. I would be going out and finding, in the event that one of these guys doesn't work out the way they wanted to, I would be finding some of the best quarterback talent evaluators, the proven guys that have ever done this in the NFL, even if you have to go to the old folks' home and haul them out of the chair, bring them in and have them help you evaluate some of these quarterbacks and get a different pair of eyes on it. Because next year, if you're going to be spending 2 first-round picks on this person, you absolutely want to make sure you're getting it right.
And the other part of it too, Ashley, what do we say about future draft picks? What do we call them?
Marketing strategy.
Right.
They are a marketing strategy at best to make a fan base excited. So don't fall for it, Browns fans. Do not fall for it.
That's what we have to kind of hedge on here, is the picks they've made this year and the future picks. They've got to hit. They've got it, like Quinshon Judkins, got to be good. You know, Harold Fannin, got to be good. Dylan Sampson. I get the Dylans. Drafting 2 Dylans is going to cause me problems all year.
2 Dylans spelled differently, by the way.
And a Schlesinger.
Schlesinger, you did it, Dan.
I did it.
Well, you know what? Well, I said before the draft so many times they need to draft 2 Dylans.
Well, yeah, right. There we go. All right, well, hey, Mary Kay, that was a great segue. Because I thought this was, so Jim in Zanesville asked about drafting 2 quarterbacks, and I think there is a discussion to be had here. Jim in Zanesville says, instead of 2 QBs, why not make one of those picks an offensive lineman? Now, I got an email today, too, that I thought made a good point, and I know this pushes back against, your idea, Mary Kay, draft 2 quarterbacks, draft 2 running backs. Are the Browns as a roster in a position, because running back is sometimes thought of as a luxury pick. I would push back a little on that, especially because I think the Browns have a good offensive line. Now, it might be in transition next year, but right now for this year, their offensive line is in a good spot. So I think you can put a running back behind it. But 2 running backs, and more so 2 quarterbacks in a class that it didn't seem like they were super sold on, right? It's not like you took one in the first round and then one in the 6th. You took a 3rd and a 5th rounder. Did they use their picks effectively, basically using 4 picks on 2 positions instead of maybe spreading that wealth out a little more?
Well, certainly 100%. I believe that spending the 2 picks on the running backs in this particular draft and where they got them was the right thing to do. They needed a running game. I thought last year the lack of a running game just made everything go to heck in a handbag. I just really felt that the quarterbacks were not supported enough with a running game. The defense was not supported enough with a running game. They did not possess the ball enough. They could not score the football well enough. They just couldn't do it. They didn't get those home runs. Now Jerome later in the season, he was hitting some home runs. He started to heat up and he was doing a nice job. but they didn't have what they need and they did not commit to the run fully. That's going to change this year. They are going to be back at the traditional Kevin Stefanski, lots of 2 tight end sets, maybe some 3 tight end sets, a robust running game, play action, wide zone, all the things that we know are characteristic of that kind of an offense. So I thought that was absolutely fine to do that. They needed it 100%. No problem with that. As far as the quarterbacks are concerned, I think that remains to be seen because it all kind of hinges on Shador. If he comes in as a 5th round pick, makes the team, contributes, starts football games, then I think it's well worth it. And I also think, and I've said this so many times before, you have to take some bites of the apple at quarterback if you're going to get anywhere with that position. So I really have no problem with that. And I think they did enough in free agency that they're covered. I don't think we have even really scratched the surface of how many guys that they actually added in free agency because none of them were superstars. And so we're forgetting that they filled a lot of needs in free agency, including along the offensive line. So I think they're going to be okay there for now. Like you said, Dan, the offensive line is starting to get up there. Not starting to get up there. The offensive line is up there, especially with Joel. But I think they'll be okay. And I think they will also add some in free agency coming up over the next weeks and months. And I think they'll be all right. I don't really have a problem with it. Again, Shador was the only sort of question mark in this regard. But how many times have we all said on this pod, figure out the quarterback room, figure it out. So I cannot argue with that.
Yeah, I think the arguments I would make would be because we're talking about the picks they gave up were late picks, which those are you take a wide receiver with one of those picks, it's a low hit rate, right? So again, the Sanders thing was such a good value play, but because of when it happened and because of what they had already done with Dylan Gabriel, you in hindsight you look back and you're like, well, could they have used that Dylan Gabriel pick on a safety? Xavier Watts went 2 picks later. The 2 running backs, could you have turned one of those guys into a receiver? Or, could you have taken, Schlesinger? And again, they valued him because we don't know what's going on with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Was that a spot where you could have taken Jaden Higgins, who went to Houston 1 pick later? That stuff is sort of nitpicking, sort of like, I'm sure there's people out there, I might be one of them. I really like Quinshon Judkins. I probably would have taken Travion Henderson over him. I think Quinshon Judkins is a good pick, and I think he's going to be a good running back. So I don't mind that. But then do you do something different than maybe taking a second running back? Do you boost that receiving core? But also, there's always this disconnect between what we think and what the front office thinks. And I have gotten the vibe all offseason that there are just certain places where this team wants to see guys. They want to see Cedric Tillman. They probably want to see Jamari Thrash. They want to see Isaiah McGuire and Alex Wright. And they want to see these young guys, these former draft picks, get these opportunities that if you put too much else there, they're not going to get them. So, do I agree with that strategy across the board? No, but it doesn't matter because I'm not the one making the decision. So I think that's a part of it too, Ashley, is like, yeah, would I have liked to have seen them add an edge rusher? Yes. But I think they're looking at it like, we want to see Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire and Joe Tryon Schwenk. Like, we want to see if there's something there with these guys. I think there's an element of that at some of these positions.
I do too, and at least they took, with their first overall pick, an interior pass rusher in Mason Graham, who can obviously be really disruptive along the line, depending on where you want to use him. So, like, that gets a pass for me. Also, like, the receiver thing, I know I think I said this on the Friday night pod. In terms of day 3, like, these guys just have not hit on a day 3 receiver, truly, in any meaningful capacity in terms of, like, somebody getting to a second contract and being a regular contributor. I mean, I think the closest we can say they've gotten is DPJ, but they got rid of him, and he's not really obviously done anything since he was here. So to me, it's like, okay, whatever, it's fine. Like, it's fine. We knew this is how they always view these pass catchers in a different light than we do. It is what it is. They have yet to really hit on somebody in a day 3 pick for that room. So, as I said on Friday night, like, why would I think this year is going to be any different? I don't expect that to be the case. So, I mean, and you do have some of those younger guys, and we talked about this on Friday. Like, you do have to figure out what you're going to do with David Bell. And is Jamari Thrash, your day 3 receiver pick from last year, is he going to be anything? Like, he hasn't had a lot of opportunity to disprove what I am saying. So I'm not surprised this is the route they went.
Yeah, and I always try to do this. I try to think, like, what are we going to be saying in October or November? And sometimes I'm wrong. A lot of times I'm wrong. There's some pods last year where I said, I think in November we're going to be saying, man, Quinton Jefferson was a great signing. But anyway, I do worry, Mary Kay, that we're going to be sitting there in October or November and we're going to be doing a post-game pod or a Hey Mary Kay pod or something like that. We're going to be saying, man, I wish they had one more receiver. I wish they had gone a little harder at edge rusher because it just feels like they don't have enough there. Safety, I wish that they had one more guy at safety. And maybe that just speaks to this idea of they couldn't fill everything at once. Like, this roster's in transition. This year is they're not going to go win the Super Bowl this year, folks. I think we all know that. And they just weren't going to be able to fix everything. And so we're going to see some young guys get opportunities, and some of them are going to hit and they're going to come out of next year feeling great. And some of them, it's not going to work. And it's going to be clear, hey, we've got to address this offseason, either with some money or with some draft capital.
Well, one thing that comes to mind as we are taping this podcast and talking all about the quarterbacks, couldn't you just see the Browns throwing a complete monkey wrench into the whole entire operation and trading for Kirk Cousins? I mean, couldn't you just see that?
After what happened yesterday, I will never say that, they're not going to do anything. I think they are just like, you know what? I'm not even going to say it. I just would not be surprised by anything.
Right? I mean, what if the Falcons are like, hey, we're sorry about what happened with Shedeur Sanders. No, I'm kidding. That's a whole other topic of the prank phone call that came in from the Falcons defensive coordinator's son to Shedeur Sanders. So I was kidding around about that. But what if the Falcons decide to kind of give him up for less than they intended to because he just doesn't want to be there, and that it might not be good for Michael Penix to have a quarterback on the roster who doesn't want to be there? So what if they give him up for some late round pick and for, I don't know, maybe $10 million this year or something like that, or maybe even a little bit less? What if they're willing to give him up at a bargain basement price? And I'll tell you, if they do that, it wouldn't shock me. I don't think it's going to happen. At this point, I think it's unlikely for that to happen, but I don't think we can forget about the fact that Kirk Cousins is still hanging out there as a possibility for some teams. And if the Browns really wanted to kind of be sure to get to winning this year, that would probably be one way to do it. Again, not to get people riled up, because I do not think that this will happen. But in the world of the Cleveland Browns and Andrew Berry, anything can happen.
You know, again, I want to sit here and say, come on, that's not possible. But I just watched this team take Dylan Gabriel at number 94 and then trade up to take Shedeur Sanders while they were introducing their day 2 draft picks to us in a press conference. And just, you never, I witnessed this team trade 3 first-round picks and give Deshaun Watson $230 million. So anything is possible. This team flies very under the radar, because if you remember the Watson thing, actually, that was not expected. And then all of a sudden we find out, oh, the Browns are one of the teams visiting him. So this team is very secretive. They operate in the dark. And so nothing would surprise me. Let's do one more question. This one's a real downer. I apologize to everyone out there listening, but because of the moves the Browns made, this was a topic that obviously was on a lot of people's minds. And so we're just going to put it out there. From Ray in Greenville, South Carolina. What do you think the future for Nick Chubb is in Cleveland? And Ashley, this was a topic that we talked about as they made these picks. This is something that we were kind of just discussing amongst ourselves, sitting there in the draft room all weekend. this weekend was not a good weekend for the folks who want to see Nick Chubb back in a Cleveland Browns uniform.
No, I mean, again, to the point we just made, I guess never say never, but certainly right now, this doesn't feel incredibly likely. I mean, especially because Catherine Hickman and Glenn Cook, the assistant GMs, but I believe it was really Catherine that when she got up there after they drafted Judkins and made that comp, right? And it's funny because I know in my research of him and just watching Ohio State, I never exactly considered him as being a comp for Nick. I actually, which I know Dan, you said the same thing, more of a comp for Kareem Hunt with his running style, right? So that's
like
kind of
just the same violent running style reminds me of Kareem.
Yes, but anyways, I mean, to that point, I think if they're thinking that, and then you bring in Dylan Sampson too, who's a different profile. He's smaller. He's more in that elusive runner vein. Now it's like, what are you bringing Nick Chubb back for? Would he want to come back when this organization went out there and 2 of these 7 picks they made were running backs, and they took one pretty high? And I know some people I saw this criticism throughout the weekend of people saying they took Judkins too high. They took him too high. Those guys were going. Like, Travion Henderson went 2 picks later at 38 to the Patriots. Those guys were always going to go high. So I know we say you can get running back talent later. You can. I think like they did with Dylan Sampson, but those Ohio State guys were kind of the exception to me. They were going high because of their versatility and how productive they were.
And a key word from Andrew that he used twice was bell cow when he talked about Quinshon Judkins. So again, there were a lot of day 3 guys I liked. Tootin is a guy I liked from Virginia Tech. Etienne from Georgia, a guy I liked. But I don't know if those guys were like bell cow backs, like the guy that who's going to be your number one guy and he's going to get the bulk of the carries. I thought it was interesting that Andrew used that phrasing, Mary Kay, when he talked about him. And you just sort of have to ask yourself now, like as cool as it would be to see Nick Chubb back in a Browns jersey, it's almost like what good does that do anyone? Because Nick would be coming back as what? I don't know. I don't even know what his role would be at this point. If they're going with Quinshon and you still have Jerome Ford in that room and Dylan Sampson, I just don't even know what his role would be. So at this point, it's almost like, would you really just want to bring back Nick Chubb to hang out? I don't think Nick would want to do that either.
Well, first of all, I would not completely rule out Nick Chubb coming back to this football team. As it stands right now, they've got Quinshon and they've got Dylan, their new rookies, and they have Jerome Ford. If Nick came back, he would be coming back really as the 4th running back. And I think that would be not really an ideal situation. You wouldn't necessarily want that. So unless something changes in that regard, then I don't think he's going to be back. But there is a world in which he can come back. Now, if he does, once again, it's in a completely different role than what he's used to. It would be in very much a backup role. So even though everyone got so mad at me at the start of free agency for suggesting that this was the end of the Nick Chubb era, for all intents and purposes, it is the end of the Nick Chubb era as we have all known it since 2018. And that is unfortunate. So it's just probably going to be a matter of whether or not Nick Chubb would want to be back here in a support type of role and maybe not even active on game day, because he's not really a special teamer. He's not really your short yardage guy. He's not really your third down back. He's the bell cow. That is his role, to be that bell cow back. And if he's not going to be that, then he's just the backup bell cow back, and it's hard to get those guys onto the football field. So I think in a perfect world, if Nick could find another situation for himself that's better, then I think he should try to do that. But if he doesn't find that, I could see the Browns still throwing him a lifeline.
All right, we had Mary Kay freezing up there at the end there. I'm not sure if she could still hear us or not. Okay, so we are going to wrap things up there on our Orange and Brown Talk podcast. I really appreciate everyone who jumped here on our live YouTube Orange and Brown Talk feed. Most of you behaved yourselves in the chat, so I appreciate that. Most of you, not all of you, but we'll save the lectures for another day. If you are not a subscriber to this podcast, Apple Podcasts and Spotify is where you can find it. Orange and Brown Talk. You just got to search for that. On Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. On Twitter, Orange Brown Talk. And our YouTube, if you aren't already on our YouTube channel watching, is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Full week of draft recap pods coming up for you, including a couple pods with Tim and Lance. For Mary Kay and Ashley, Mary Kay left us too soon. I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.